Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Congregation Beth Shalom in San Francisco. I'm Rabbi Dan Ain, and this is your take-home Torah for Parshat Ve'era. It is Friday, November 6, 2020. And what a week it's been. Well, first of all, I just want to say I miss seeing you. I miss coming to services. As you know, we are beginning our return to the synagogue with our first Kabbalat Shabbat this evening. And I look forward to very much the opportunity to be in this space with all of you once again, to be hearing the words of Torah and to be praying. And I hope and I pray that that time is very soon. Obviously, this has been a hard week. It's been a long week. I know I have spent a lot of time refreshing my browser to check the latest vote count. But I'm recording this on Thursday afternoon, where we don't yet know who the president will be. But God willing, by the time Shabbat comes around and you get this take-home Torah, we'll know who the next president of the United States will be. And one of the things that was fascinating to me during this week and all of the various conversations we've had about Judaism and about politics, it's been fascinating to me the response that people had, no matter whom they might have voted for. The idea that we are split down the middle. And I know for many of us in our community, it has been a challenge to understand how so many people could have voted in a different way from the way that they voted. And I know that that has been a source of a lot of pain and disappointment and confusion. And I think this topic is addressed in this week's Torah portion. And we've had a chance to study it a little bit. And so in this week's Torah portion in Parshat Ve'era, we see Abraham, our father, sitting in front of his tent in a hot daytime hour. And he sees three foreigners, three strangers. And Abraham, who was known for his great morality of hachnasat orchim, of welcoming guests, runs out. He's just been circumcised, by the way. He's healing from that, and he runs out. He greets these three strangers, welcomes them into his tent, and he feeds them, and he takes care of them. And these three angels turn out to be messengers from God, and they have two messages to give to him, two miraculous, extraordinary pieces of news. First piece of news is that his wife, who is approaching 90 years old, will soon be with child. And when Sarah, if we know, when she hears about this, she's hiding inside of the tent. And when she hears about this, she chuckles and she laughs at the sheer absurdity, ridiculousness that this could come into being. And so, of course, her child is named Yitzchak, ultimately, for he laughs. But then there's the second prophecy that is given to Abraham, and that's the prophecy of the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. And we read in our Torah this little conversation that God has either with himself or with the angels, and he wonders out loud almost. He says, should I keep this thing from Abraham that I'm about to do, this wiping out of Sodom and Gomorrah? For Avraham is to become a great and mighty nation, and through it all the nations of the earth will be blessed. For I have turned my particular attention to him, so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of God, to practice dutiful benevolence and justice, so that God may bring upon Avraham that which God said about him. So God approaches Abraham to tell him that this town of Sodom and Gomorrah are going to be wiped out. Now, what do we know about Sodom? We know that this is a town that is wicked. It values its individuals. Rabbi Hirsch writes, it's a pleasure-seeking world, addicted to sensual enjoyment, a world that ultimately values a person only to the extent that they're useful, only to the extent that they can click the right ad or buy the right thing. That's the only value that they have. Now, according to this worldview, Hirsch writes that egoism becomes a sacred principle of life. Helplessness is considered a crime, and offering assistance is considered a folly and an offense against the public welfare. Under the rule of the principle of Sodom, Hirsch writes, entitlements are dictated only by achievements, not by needs. The poor and the needy are despised. Only a wealthy man like Lot, who is bound to provide jobs and profit, is perhaps granted rights. But begging is forbidden, and those who cannot support themselves are punished, imprisoned, and deported. Now, of course, these are the values that run against the values of our tradition, values of Abraham, and the values of our prophets. So when Abraham hears that the town of Sodom is going to be wiped out, what does he do? He negotiates with God, and he tries to ask him a question. Will you also wipe out the righteous along with the wicked? And when thinking about some of, I guess, the disappointment and the anger and the frustration, how there could be other cities or other municipalities who could support a cause or an individual that is so opposite of us, I was struck that here it is in this text. Here we have Abraham, who is standing up for a town, Sodom, that is the total antithesis of who he is. And he asks God, will you wipe away the 50? If I find 50 righteous, is that good? How about 45? How about 40? How about 30? How about 20? He gets God all the way down to 10. All the way down to 10. But we know that they were not able to find 10 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah. And so it was wiped out. It's really fascinating to think about this role that prophecy has, where we are challenging God here. Abraham is challenging God, challenging his need for judgment. And what Abraham, the value that Abraham points out here is that even if the judgment is due, even if it's deserved, even if the punishment is warranted, there is still a role for chesed and for tzedakah and for warmth. And the role of the prophet sometimes is to stand in between the will of God and the will of individuals. And in most of the cases in our tradition, most of the prophets, like Isaiah, that we love, are raining down a message from on high, telling us to take care of the needy, to shelter the homeless. And we have to hear that message because that's God's will. But the role of the prophet sometimes is also to plead on behalf of people. Behalf of people who might be living in a corrupt and evil world, in an evil environment. And to appreciate that even if we don't understand them, even if they have completely opposite values than we do, we have to learn how to follow the example of Abraham as Jews and sit in the front of our tent. We have to find a way to go out and to meet them and to greet them because they are created b'tselem Elohim, like us. And so my prayer, by the time that you watch this, is that one, the election is over and we have a victor, and that two, no matter who wins, that we continue to be like Abraham and to stand in the breach and to try to create relationships and understandings and miracles, no matter how absurd or miraculous it might seem. So I just want to wish all of you a Shabbat Shalom. We love you. We miss you. God bless. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. Shabbat Shalom.